Welcome to the Intuitive Therapist Podcast with Janis R. Cohen, therapist, clairvoyant, empath, and medium. Listen in as she takes a no-nonsense deep dive into real human struggles and how to resolve them. Janis will share channeled information from her spirit guide team, as well as the angels and archangels, to help you master your emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual destiny. And now, Janis R. Cohen.
Hey y'all, this is Janis Cohen, the Intuitive Therapist here on the Intuitive Therapist Podcast. Have you ever tried to argue with the truth? Like when you think about it, you don't like something that's happening in your life. You don't like what somebody's done, how they've shown up in your life. You feel disappointed that something didn't happen the way you wanted it to happen. How have you felt when you tried to argue with the truth of life? For me, there's a tremendous sense of frustration, vulnerability, and powerlessness. When I don't want to accept something, I'm arguing with the truth. And I wonder if you have ever felt that way. Think about it. Think about what's happening in your life at this very moment. We feel so vulnerable to the external influences much of the time, like I think most people do, and it can make what happens in our life feel as if we have no control over how it impacts our life, or figure out a way to integrate what is actually going on in the present if we give our power away to what's outside of us. If you're like me, you have a prescribed way of looking at life, like there is a particular lens through which you process your experiences and thoughts. And we all do this. It helps somewhat to create a sense of order and structure to how we live our lives. Yet, do you really look at how you look at life? Are you a big picture kind of person? A negative Nelly? Are you an optimist? Are you flexible in how you perceive life? Or do you just kind of like go from one situation to another, never really addressing what happened before? As a fixed sign, I'm a Taurus, and I'm really grounded. And we fixed signs, we tend to be the hard workers, the laborers, and the people who put in all the required work to ensure that something eventually becomes a success. And we tend to be the stable ones, the reliable ones, the consistent ones in our thoughts and actions. And those qualities always bring people who need that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been somewhere and all of a sudden somebody's pouring their heart out to me in a grocery line, or somewhere, somehow, it's like the sense of calm that I have, people need to be heard. And it's not just because I'm a therapist. They don't know me, but they share a lot. So we're not unpredictable, and you generally know what to expect from us. That said, I tend to have a stubborn streak in me. I take a lot until a certain point. I'm very patient, calm. But if it gets to a certain point, then the bull comes out. You've crossed a line. And unless I see a really good reason to change something, whether it be a thought, belief, or action, I'm pretty good at staying my course and standing my ground. Most people know where I stand. But over the years, I've strengthened the muscle of flexibility because I've needed to. And sometimes being so stable in my life or in a position, it doesn't help me move forward in the way that I want to. And I've had to shift this simply because I've had to. I've had to pivot a lot in my life. And so staying on the same course hasn't helped me in certain circumstances, right? I probably would have remained very unhappy because I would have been practicing the rigidity that so often accompanies being a fixed sign. I remember a time in my life where I decided to try a new way of looking at what was happening in my life. And what I did was start to practice radical acceptance. That is what I cultivated. In my mature years, these years lately, y'all, I've learned a stronger sense of wisdom that's real simple. And this is the way I operate now. And the wisdom that's so simple but so huge is that it is what it is. Now, what do I do with this? And shifting into this mindset, it has saved me such heartache over the years. I no longer argue with the truth, and I see life and others as it and they show up. That's it. I don't add any other qualities or characteristics to anything. What is. And then I figure out what I'm going to do with it. So that said, radically accepting the present means that I can radically choose how I want to respond to it. There's no confusion, because if I accept what shows up, I'm not trying to make it be something that it's not. I look at the concrete facts of things. If the sky is cloudy with a little sun, I can accept that and choose to appreciate the little bit of sun that shines from the clouds. If I'm disappointed about something not turning out the way I want it to, I can accept that it hasn't, and then I look to see the lesson in the disappointment and use that to move forward. And I have made significant improvements in this area, but alas, I still have more work to do when a massive want doesn't get met for me. It's all a process, this thing called life, isn't it? We're all in a constant work and integration mode, trying to improve ourselves day by day. Everybody's in that school. Imagine, though, if you were the type of person that was so in the moment that no fear, no worry, no stress, and no suffering existed. Pretty amazing, huh? You just hopped from one lily pad to another with a more gleeful approach, not in denial, but just not attached. How much easier would your life be if you did that? Today's topic is all about accepting what is so that you can take ownership of your next steps as it relates to the current moment. There is such power in shifting into that perspective. Life becomes, at the very least, more tolerable. And we let go of the bind that we put ourselves in when we're addicted to an expectation of how it should be. When we have this addiction of how it should be, the bind becomes out of only two options. If my expectation is met, I'm happy. But if it's not, I'm in pain. Radically accepting what it teaches us about the fluidity of life, radical acceptance teaches that anything can change at any moment, and that we are the change makers of our own lives. We get to choose what we do in the present moment, because that's all we have, right, y'all? And we can shift gears at any time to move in a different direction, simply if we're not pleased about where we're at. Like, that's the power that we have. If we don't like something, you really can change it. You can't change anything outside of you. You can't change anybody else. But you can change how you respond to the needs of the moment. That's the beauty of taking charge of what happens to you. You get served what you get served, and then you choose which parts you take and which parts you leave. It's really that simple. But for whatever reason, people don't think that they have that kind of power. It's confusing, at least to me. Nothing in life is impossible to deal with. That doesn't mean that the hard things don't happen. And that doesn't mean that the hard things aren't excruciating. But there is always a way out. You can do hard things and not just survive them, but thrive because you overcame them. And you're a master manifester in your life, like every day. You can have the intention to encounter people who treat you nicely. Set the intention and see what happens when you put that energy out in the world. You get to determine what happens to you when you simply own how you hold yourself accountable in your life. Consider life in every moment as if it were giving you a silver platter with the full menu each day, only it's kind of like piece by piece. You can look at it, smell it, hold it, examine it, think about it, and then decide what you want to do with it, all in one moment, all in 1 millisecond, all by staying present and just receiving each moment and then owning it as if you chose it to happen. So, my dear friend, take each moment by the reins, even if that means just being in the moment and seeing what happens, receiving. That's owning the moment as if you chose it. I receive what happens, regardless if I like it or not. When you become curious about your life, not resentful, not judgmental, not angry, and choose to use each moment, suddenly life transforms into something pretty cool and exciting, kind of like, okay, well, if this crappy thing happens and I do this and I say, all right, I got you, I accept it, wasn't meant for me, here's how I'm going to pivot, that can be really cool because you get to see the power that you have in your life and what you bring in when you make choices that aren't attached to anything. Life does become exciting rather than overbearing and punishing. So, my dear, take charge of each moment as if you've chosen it and watch what unfolds as a result. I wish you a blessed day, a wonderful week, and as always, live intuitively.
Thanks for listening to The Intuitive Therapist. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share this podcast with a friend. And be sure to give us some stars and a favorable review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in.